Bryce's best 10. Here we go. Going into week 10 of this NFL season. Week 10, Bryce's best 10. Here we go. The 10th best team in the NFL is the Miami Dolphins. Miami drops one spot, only one spot from last week, and here's why. So I know Miami, a lot of people are selling stock on Miami. I understand that. All three good to competent, over 500 teams they played. They've lost to all three. Now, the good news I would take from Miami, and I know styles make fights, so every game is different. It's like a snowflake. Every snowflake, no two are the same. But first, okay team, solid team. First team over 500 they play was the Buffalo Bills. And they got mollywopped. They lost 48-20, wasn't even close. Then they play Philadelphia. They lose 31-17, but it's close. It's tight. They're somewhat competitive, although they can't really move the ball offensively and defensively. They couldn't get stops on Jalen Hurts and that Philly rushing attack. Then on Sunday, against Kansas City in Germany, listen, had the ball into his hands last drive of the game, couldn't get it done. But if you're a Dolphins fan, and some of this is Kansas City's limitations offensively in terms of their wide receivers, but if you're a Dolphins fan, you're sitting back and saying, timeout. An offense with Mahomes and Kelsey, as bad as our defense has been, 25th in the league coming into that game. We held them to 14 points. If not for the Tyreek Hill fumble, that game maybe goes to overtime. So we did compete with Kansas City. Listen, moral victories. I know people are getting on the Cowboys for that today, and maybe people might get on me for the Dolphins on that today. I understand that. But given what they put on film, given how explosive this offense has shown itself to be, they're going into a bye week. So I think it's an opportunity for Mike McDaniel to kind of reevaluate where they're at as a football team, emphasize the run more, make things a little bit easier on Tua, get the offensive line healthy, and the defense with Vic Fangio seems to be turning a corner. So that is good news for the Dolphins. They still, barely, but they are still in my top 10. At number 9, making their Bryson's best 10 debut, stand up Minnesota Vikings. Never thought I would say this. Skol! That felt weird as a Steelers fan. I'm not going to lie to you. Minnesota, the 9th best team in the NFL, and here is why. So, 4-game winning streak, second only to the Jacksonville Jaguars in terms of their win streak. And you look at what the Vikings have done over the last 4 games. So we know the offensive piece they have. Justin Jefferson coming off of IR today, by the way. Not sure if he's going to play Sunday, according to Kevin O'Connell. But you can potentially get Jefferson back healthy. Jordan Addison has shown himself to be a really talented young rookie. Hawkinson is still top 10 tight end. And you have this guy by the name of Joshua Space Dobbs. I call him Space Dobbs, at least. NASA called him the Pastronaut, which is awesome. But I'll tell you what he did. He dominated, you'll hear that term a lot, dominated the Atlanta Falcons defense, of which Atlanta, by the way, 6th ranked overall defense coming into this game, and Joshua Dobbs hangs 31 on them, and 3 touchdowns accounted for. 2 through the air, 1 on the ground, including a game-winning drive to win at the end for Minnesota, despite really not even knowing the playbook, which is unheard of. But for Minnesota, a big thing for them is the fact that in this 4-game winning streak, Brian Flores, maybe it takes a little bit to get the guys used to the new defensive system. In this 4-game winning streak, they gave up 13 to the Bears, 17, this is very impressive, 17 to the high-powered 49ers offense, 10 to the Packers, now 28 to Atlanta. Not great. You'd like to improve off that. But you got the Saints, Broncos, Bears coming up after this. So the Vikings playing really good football on both sides of the ball. The defense was a massive concern for them last season. Not this year. Certainly not to the degree it was last year. Brian Flores has really cleaned everything up in that regard. But Minnesota playing really good football. They found their quarterback for the rest of the season. And dare I say, maybe they don't have to draft a quarterback. I've said for all year Joshua Dobbs is a starting quarterback in the NFL. Said that even in Arizona. Certainly I'm saying that now in Minnesota. Now he's got the pieces surrounding him. The Vikings, stand up Minnesota, 9th best team in the National Football League. Moving to number 8, they don't move a spot from last week. It is the San Francisco 49ers. Kind of hard to punish a team when they didn't play last week. Niners are the 8th best team in the NFL, and here's why. So I am optimistic about San Francisco coming into this week and coming into the second half of their season coming off of the bye. I think Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan off on this 3-game losing streak will kind of recalibrate where they're at, to put Brock Purdy in better positions to succeed, get Trent Williams back healthy, which is going to be really key for them, get Deebo Samuel back healthy. Really, for San Francisco, the optimistic thing for them is, it's still a fantastic roster. Don't let the 3-game losing streak blind you for the fact that this is a very, very talented football team. We've seen what they can do at their apex. If not for a missed field goal in Cleveland, they're 6-2 and in the race to get the 1 seed still. So you give props to the 49ers in that regard. What I think is big for San Francisco, McCaffrey gets healthy on the bye. Trent Williams, you hope to get him back soon. Deebo Samuel, the Niners defense still very talented with Fred Warner, Nick Bosa. They added Chase Young. That feels kind of big. Chase Young is going to flourish with that Niners pass rush, as virtually every Niners pass rusher does. So the 49ers, I still have them as the 8th best team in the NFL. To number 7, if I can find them, to number 7, they also, if I'm doing this correctly, they also, they moved down a spot because somebody moved up. The Jacksonville Jaguars, the 7th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So they're playing San Francisco on Sunday, and what I think is, a weekend of some kind of mid games. This is the best one, Jacksonville and San Francisco, 1 p.m. Eastern in Jacksonville. But the Jaguars only moved down a spot because somebody else jumped them. But they're coming off a bye as well. Longest winning streak in the NFL. You wouldn't know it given the coverage surrounding Trevor Lawrence. All this negativity, acting like he's not one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the league at his height, at his peak. Travis Etienne has run the football very effectively. One of the best rushers in the NFL. The Jacksonville Jaguars defense, of which I had concerns about coming into this season. This is big for them. Number 1, numero uno in the NFL in takeaways. So they've set up the offense into short fields, put them in position to cash in the red zone, and otherwise the defense has scored touchdowns this season. So when you look at what they put together offensively, Doug Peterson coming off of a bye will have a good game plan. That's why I can't wait for this game. 2 great coaches, a great quarterback and an excellent quarterback coming off of a bye week. This should be a fantastic matchup in Jacksonville. But I've got the Jaguars for that reason as the 7th best team in the NFL. Jacksonville, number 7 in the National Football League. At number 6, it is the Detroit Lions. They drop a spot again because somebody else jumped them. Detroit, the 6th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So, again, we cannot let your overall body of work matters. It just does. We can't let that loss to Baltimore, which we see Baltimore's doing this to a lot of teams, blind us from the fact that Jared Goff is still top 10 in virtually every offensive statistical category in terms of touchdown passes, yards, completion percentage, etc. He's also not turning the football over this season. He did have a pick 6 against the Raiders, so you have to dial that back a little bit if you're the Detroit Lions, but they're playing tremendous football. Jahmyr Gibbs, this is a Lions team that's capable of scoring 40 on you any given Sunday, especially if they're playing in Detroit. They're a dangerous offense at home, only 1 loss at home to this point this year. They're still in the race. If you look at their schedule for the number 1 seed, and this defense with Aiden Hutchinson, Alex Anzalone and company has been consistently been one of the better ones in the NFL. Now, Detroit does need to capitalize more in the red zone. They had 3 trips in the red zone their last game against the Vegas Raiders. Did not cash in until their 4th trip in the red zone. So they got to be able to be more efficient in that regard. But Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, this is a very well-coached team on both sides of the ball. They're ready to play week in and week out. And again, that speaks to the coach and the coaching staff. The Lions are the 6th best team in the National Football League. To number 5, breaking back into the top 5 for the first time since earlier this season, it is the Cincinnati Bengals. Don't love to say that as a Steelers fan, but I got to be honest and objective. Cincinnati flies up 2 spots. They were number 7 last week, number 5 this week. They are easily the most dangerous team, the last team, if you're an AFC team, that you want to face at this point in the season, and certainly once the postseason rolls around. Again, with a healthy Joe Burrow, the worst season, and it's only been 2 and really 3 to this point with a healthy Burrow, is an AFC title game loss at the gun against the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead. So, with that said, Joe Burrow, since coming back from injury, or since really getting healthy from the calf injury, has been absolutely lights out. Over 300 yards passing and multiple touchdowns against the 49ers. Over 300 yards passing, a passer rating well over 100 against a very good Buffalo Bills defense. Jamar Chase to Higgins. Now, they're dealing with injuries. Higgins and Chase. Chase dealing with a back injury right now. A little bit of a concern for Cincinnati. You hope he can get that straightened out sooner rather than later. But this Bengals defense, y'all, is legit. Again, we talked about what the Vikings have done on the defensive side of the ball, but when we look at Cincinnati has done as well, it is truly impressive in this 4-game winning streak. So they gave up 20 to Arizona. Again, that's a Josh Dobbs-led Arizona team. Only 13 to the Seattle Seahawks, which has a great wide receiver trio. 17 to the high-powered Niners offense, and 18 to Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Again, Allen and Stephon Diggs only had 10 points until there was about 3.5 minutes to go. So the Bengals defense, great pass rush, really good secondary, which has surprised me a little bit this year. But Cincinnati, to me, the 5th best team in the NFL, and Joe Burrow is very much back. Watch out for the Bengals. At number 4, it is the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas drops a spot from last week. The Cowboys, the 4th best team in the NFL, and here is why. So, again, I don't want to sound like the guy who's talking about moral victories. At the end of the day, Herman Edwards said it best. You play to win the game. Okay, Dallas, at the end of the day, situationally was not good down the red zone when they got to the 6-yard line, ended up running their last play from the 30 with under 30 seconds left in that game against Philadelphia. That said, Dak Prescott over his last 3 games has been absolutely marvelous. A pass rating of over 100 in all 3. One turnover in the last 3 games. So he's played clean football. He's played efficient football. Completion percentage is off the chain. Passer rating is excellent. So is his QBR. CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott have really evolved into, I could argue, one of the 3 or 4 best wide receiver quarterback combos in all of football. Now, this Cowboys defense did give up 28 to Philadelphia, obviously to be mentioned a little later on Bryce's best 10, but Jalen Hurts played pretty well. But listen, they did shut out Philly when they needed to. They shut out Philly in the fourth quarter. Problem is the offense for Dallas just couldn't get it done at the very, very end, although it was an admirable effort. Outside of Terrence Steele, this Cowboys offensive line played well. Tyron Smith, you could still, even despite the fact he's 13 years into his career, you could still feel his presence. Again, I have some questions about whether or not Dallas is a true number 2 receiver, but Jake Ferguson seems to be kind of finding his role in the offense. Tony Pollard, need to get him more involved. Hasn't had 60 yards rushing since week 2 of the season, so need to get him involved more in the offense. I think since week 3, rather. But Dak is playing out of his mind. The offensive line has shown improvement, and you've seen a true change from McCarthy in the play calling in terms of let Dak be Dak. Let Dak cook to a certain extent. Let him get outside the pocket. It's when he's at his best. That's why he's part of the reason why he's played so well the last few weeks. The Cowboys are the 4th best team in the National Football League. At number 3, it's the defending champions who move up a spot. It is the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City, the 3rd best team in the NFL, and here's why. So, again, they scored 21 points, although 14 of those were offensive against the Dolphins defense that we do have some questions about, although I do think Miami is kind of a turning corner defensively, getting Xavier Howard back and Jalen Ramsey back from injury. But for Kansas City, we've seen this before. 2 years ago in November of 2021, folks, go back and look. I talked about this on Monday. They were struggling to break 20. They're barely getting into the teens against some average to below average defenses in 2021. And then in December, late November, early December, they turned it on. Travis Kelce got going. Mahomes we saw this last year, getting guys like Justin Watson, Sky Moore. This year, Rashee Rice involved. Again, the only difference between this year's receiving core and last year is that there's no Juju Smith-Schuster. Well, is Juju tearing it up in New England? I don't think so. Kansas City also. And this, I never thought I'd say this in the Mahomes era, but it's a credit to Brett Beach and the job they've done drafting, bringing in some new defensive players. Kansas City, number 2 in the NFL in scoring defense. So if the concern for the Chiefs is offense, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're going to be fine. Kansas City's defense, led by Chris Jones, defensively in the backfield with Trent McDuffie. By the way, Nick Bolton's not even playing right now. We saw the impact he had on the Super Bowl win against Philadelphia and the way he's played this season. So I've got the Kansas City Chiefs right now as the 3rd best team in the National Football League. At number 2 is a team that they're going to be playing after both teams got their bye. Number 2, it is the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are the 2nd best team in the NFL, and here is why. So again, by the way, Philly does not move from where they were at last week. Last week, I also had them at number 2. So, interesting stat about Philadelphia. So, their defense and their pass defense has been abysmal this season. But the good news, if you are an Eagles fan, and you will never catch me dead in an Eagles jersey, if I could pull up this stat on Philadelphia, because it is quite fascinating. It seems like we don't have it, unfortunately. Hang on. Because it was pretty impressive. No, it looks like we don't have it, but I can't quote it from memory. They were top 10 in virtually all statistical categories offensively in terms of points scored, in terms of passing yards per game. Now, the only question is Jalen Hurts has been a little bit loose with the football. He has fumbled multiple times this season. But again, if you look at their overall roster makeup, it's tremendous. Best offensive line in the league, and it's not even close. Jason Kelce having an unbelievable season. By the way, nominated for Sexiest Man Alive, so congratulations, Jason. Jalen Hurts, playing through injury, that's the only concern for Philadelphia is Jalen Hurts right? I don't think so. A.J. Brown, though, still one of the 2 or 3 best receivers in the sport. Philadelphia's front 7 is excellent. Their back end is awful. That's my question for the Eagles. However, I think they have the 2nd best roster in the NFL. To the team I have today at number 1, back-to-back weeks, the best team in the NFL is the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens sucks. It makes me want to throw up as a Steelers fan, but the Ravens today are the best team in all of football. Here's why. So Baltimore, if you look at what they're doing in terms of defense and offense, we'll get to that in just a second. But defensively, the Baltimore Ravens are number 1 in the NFL in scoring defense. And Ravens fans out there, my man Devin, shout out to Devin at the Bank Podcast, my guy. Devin, other Ravens fans out there are like this. The last time the Ravens in a single season, in the regular season, led the league in scoring defense was the 2000 Ravens defense, which of course won the Super Bowl, and personally, I think is the greatest defense that's ever been assembled. So, I thought Baltimore's defense would be good. Didn't think it'd be the best in the league. Lamar Jackson, despite... How good are you as a team when Lamar Jackson plays really well, but doesn't account for any touchdowns on the day? You play the division leader, 5-2 Seahawks, and you give up, defensively, you give up 3 points, and even more impressive, 6 first downs. And offensively, of course, you drop 37 on their heads. Todd Monken has changed this Ravens offense even more so than I thought he would. Lamar, to me, ever so slightly, but is today the MVP frontrunner. Ravens today, the best team in the NFL. I hate to say it. Real quick, okay, I've got the stat. I apologize for this earlier. The stat on Philadelphia, I meant to mention. So they are Philadelphia is second in the NFL in points per game, third in total yards per game, seventh in pass yards per game, seventh in rush yards per game. So Philadelphia could do it all offensively. We've seen that through the first 9 games and even last season. So that's why I have Philly too. And that's, by the way, why I have the Ravens. The Ravens today are the best team in the National Football League. That is Bryce's best 10 going into week 10. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.